Hi everyone. I hope you're having a calm and gentle day. In our last chapter, we followed James back to the factory he once owned, a place that stood like a monument to everything he had surrendered: the company, the power, the reputation of a man once seen as unshakable. The mockery of his former peers still echoed in his mind, a cruel reminder of how far he had fallen. And one question lingered, sharp as glass: was love really worth the price of $1 million life? In today's story, still lost in that question, James drives aimlessly after a long night of rain, and ends up at a place he never meant to visit: the old wooden house where John now lives. There, in the quiet after the storm, a simple, human moment helps him understand what truly remains when everything else has washed away. If you love stories about love, loss, and quiet awakenings, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay with us for this next chapter of Deep and James. The morning after the storm was gray and heavy, a muted kind of quiet that hums not in the air but somewhere deeper, in your chest. James drove without a destination. Only a direction. Only the need to move. Rainwater still clung to the road in long, glimmering streaks. The scent of wet earth and soaked leaves followed him like memory. He didn't know why he kept driving. Maybe it was habit, maybe it was the silence, or maybe it was the weight of everything he had already left behind. The glass office. The family company his father had built. The empire that should have been his. There had been a time when that world felt certain, when numbers, contracts, and power defined his worth. Then came deep, soft-spoken, persistent, standing in the sunlight of a place he once considered too small to matter. She taught him patience without speeches and strength without pride. For her, he left everything: the company, the city, the version of himself that once felt untouchable, to build something quieter. A life rooted not in ambition, but in soil. Not in steel, but in faith. And yet, as the truck rolled past broken fences and half-fallen trees, James felt the old ache return. That cold question: what if all this love was not enough to keep him from feeling lost? He slowed down when he saw a turn in the road, familiar, but unexpected. Before he realized it, he was there, in front of the old wooden house. The gate leaned slightly, its hinges squeaking in the wind. The garden was scattered with fallen branches, yellow leaves pressed flat by rain. And in the middle of it all, a man moved slowly with a broom, sleeves rolled up, hair damp with sweat. John. James turned off the engine and sat there for a moment. Watching. John bent to pick up broken branches, tied them into bundles, stacked them neatly by the fence. There was rhythm in his movements, patient, deliberate, the rhythm of a man who had learned to live one quiet hour at a time. Finally, James stepped out. His shoes sank slightly into the wet ground. John looked up, surprised but not startled. James nodded. Just passing by. Thought I'd check how the place held up. John smiled faintly, wiping his hands on his jeans. Not bad, considering last night. Lost a few trees, but the roof's still there. He pointed toward a pile of branches. The storm took half the guava trees. I'm trying to save what's left. James walked closer, the mud tugging at his boots. Looks like you've been busy. Can't sit still, John replied. Helps me think less. They shared a small laugh, the kind that carries sorrow but not bitterness. James leaned against the porch post. How've you been, John? John paused, thoughtful. Better, he said at last. Not perfect. But better. He lifted a fallen pot, brushed off the mud, and set it upright again. At first, no one wanted to talk to me. Some still cross the road when they see me. He gave a small, resigned smile. Guess that's fair. I did bad things. People remember. James stayed silent. The only sound was water dripping from the roof. Then John continued. There's a man down the road, old Tien. He let me help rebuild his fence after the last flood. Paid me in food, not money. Said I worked quiet, and quiet was what he needed. A faint light came to John's eyes. After that, a few others asked for help. I fix things, carry things. Keep busy. Nobody trusts me fully yet, but at least they don't look away anymore. James nodded, feeling something shift, a small, wordless recognition. John knelt to lift a small seedling that had been flattened by rain. Its stem bent, its leaves bruised. He pressed the soil around it, gentle as if tucking a child into bed. A broken plant can still live, he murmured, as long as the roots remain. James looked at him. What does that mean? John didn't look up. It means you don't always have to start over. Sometimes you just need to give it light. And time. See what grows back. Then, with a quiet smile, he added, that's what I tell myself when things fall apart. He said it casually, unaware how deeply it landed. James's gaze drifted across the garden, crooked rows of plants, dark soil still wet with rain. He thought of everything he'd left behind, the company, the wealth, the certainty, all the structures that once held him upright. Maybe he was like these plants, bent, splintered by choices he couldn't undo, but still rooted in something that hadn't given up yet. Love, faith, a home that wasn't perfect, but alive. John stood, stretching his back. You want some tea? Just boiled water. James smiled lightly. No thanks. I should get going soon. John nodded, picking up his broom again. Take care, then. The road's muddy down the slope, watch your tires. I will, James said, turning back toward the truck. The air was thick with the scent of wet grass and ash from John's small fire. Before getting in, he looked back one last time. John was already sweeping again, quiet, focused, rebuilding his small corner of the world piece by piece. James watched him, hearing the words echo. A broken plant can still live, as long as the roots remain. He looked at his hands, roughened, no longer paid in money, but in something deeper. A strange peace that came from trying, even when the outcome was uncertain. As he started the engine, a single leaf fell from above, landing softly on the windshield. He didn't brush it away. He let it stay, trembling gently as the truck rolled forward through the misty morning. The sky was still gray when James drove back toward the valley. The road curved through quiet fields where puddles shimmered like shards of glass. Every few minutes, he passed a farmer mending a fence or pulling up fallen crops. The world was rebuilding itself, slowly, quietly, the way people do after loss. When the small wooden house came into view, thin smoke curled from the kitchen chimney. The scent of lemongrass and boiled rice drifted through the mist, warm, alive, forgiving. It felt like a hand reaching out to pull him home. Deep was on the porch, kneeling beside a basket of damp laundry. Her hair tied up, sleeves rolled, bare feet pressed against the cool planks. She looked up when she heard the truck and smiled, that calm, patient smile that always made him stop for a moment before speaking. You've been gone since morning, she said softly. Everything all right? James nodded, cutting the engine. Just drove a bit. Roads were clear enough. She studied him, the way she did when she wanted to ask more but chose not to. Knees napping, she said instead. Fields flooded a little, but the fence is fine. James stepped up onto the porch, the boards creaking beneath his boots. The wet leaves clung to the walls. The rainwater still dripped from the eaves. It was all so ordinary, and somehow sacred. Deep poured a cup of warm ginger tea and set it on the table. You should drink something. You look tired, he nodded, wrapping his hands around the cup. Steam blurred the edge of his vision. I stopped by the old place, he said quietly. The one near the river? She asked. He hesitated. John's still there. Her face softened. How is he? He's all right, James said after a moment. The storm hit hard, but he's fixing things. The garden's a mess, but he's trying, Deep smiled faintly. He's learning to live again. That's enough. James looked at her, wondering how she could forgive so easily, how she could hold peace where others carried anger. I sat with him for a while, he said. We talked. He mentioned how people still avoid him, but he keeps going anyway. Deep nodded. Sometimes that's the only way to change, to just keep showing up quietly. James looked down at his tea. He said something about the plants in his yard. That a broken plant can still live as long as the roots remain. Deep didn't answer at first. The soft wind lifted a few strands of her hair. Then she whispered, "He's right." Silence settled between them, not heavy, but full. James stared toward the field, where sunlight was breaking through the clouds in thin, uneven rays. He thought of John's hands in the mud, of the broken stems standing again, of his own life, all he had uprooted to start anew. Maybe he hadn't destroyed his life by leaving it behind, maybe he had only broken the surface, to plant something new. Deep reached across the table, placed her hand over his. Her palm was warm, smelling faintly of soap and lemongrass. You've been fighting too hard, she said gently. Sometimes the ground needs time before it grows again. He looked at her, really looked. The light touched her face softly, steadily. In that moment, he understood how much of his strength had come from her, her quiet faith, her ability to keep believing even when he couldn't. I keep wondering, he said, voice low, if I made the right choice. Leaving everything. Deep smiled, small and sincere. You didn't leave everything, James. You brought what mattered most with you. Outside, the wind shifted. Sunbeams touched the muddy path, where tiny green shoots were breaking through the soil, fragile but standing. James followed her gaze and let out a long breath. Maybe we'll be okay, he whispered. Deep squeezed his hand. We already are. They sat there for a while longer, saying nothing. The house creaked softly as it dried in the sun inside. Nhi stirred, her small voice calling for her mother. Deep rose, light-footed. I'll reheat the rice, she said. Wash up before lunch. James nodded, but didn't move. He stood there, watching the horizon. The last of the rain shimmered in the furrows of the field, turning to silver under sunlight. He remembered John's words, the patience in them. A broken plant can still live, as long as the roots remain. The words lingered as he stepped into the light. His reflection flashed briefly in the window, a man no longer defined by what he lost, but by what he chose to keep. Behind him, the wind moved through the trees, scattering golden leaves across the porch, soft, slow, and whole. Some roots survive even when the storm takes everything else: love, faith, forgiveness. They are the roots we return to, again and again, and as long as they remain, nothing we lose is ever truly gone.